Okay, thank you everyone. Welcome to this Development Assessment Committee for 16th of February 2022. I'd like to open the meeting. We have Councillor Tatchell, I think, might be an apology. Councillor Edwards is yet to join us. So are there any, basically where we're at the moment, Mr. CEO?
Councillor Tatchell was with us a moment ago, Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
he's dropped back out.
He's just dropped out, and
okay. Well,
I have any other apologies.
I must admit, it was a bit touch and go. It's like team lotto sometimes. You don't know whether your number's going to come up or not sometimes at my end here. So hopefully he'll join us. And is Councillor Edwards joining us, Mr. CEO?
And I believe he is. I haven't been informed that he isn't. He must be just dialing in a little bit late.
We might just continue, Councillor, with your indulgence. Beg your pardon? Okay. Please note that this meeting will be recorded in accordance with Moorabool Shire's governance rules and also will be live streamed. Confirmation of minutes of the Development Assessment Committee, the 15th of December 2021. Somebody please move that those minutes be confirmed, please. Move Councillor Berry, seconded Councillor Minari. I'll put all those in favour. It's carried, thank you. Are there any matters arising from the previous minutes, councillors? Okay. Item 6, disclosure of conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest with respect to the agenda items listed tonight, councillors? Okay, thank you. Item 7.1, use and development of 3 warehouses and a reduction of car parking, 3 car spaces at 1 2A Station Street, Mattingley. There's a recommendation there, or for the off, Mr. Bazoodenhout wishes to make any comment on that space, or we just take it as read?
Mr. Mayor, if we can take the report as read, and happy to respond to any questions for clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Bazoodenhout. Council, there's a recommendation there to issue a planning permit for this item. Is there any questions, or Councillor Ward?
I was just happy. I was happy to move it, Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
thank you, Councillor Ward. Moved by Councillor Ward. Is there a second,
Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Edwards. Any dissent? I'll put that. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Next item of business. There's 3 of them the same here, but I think in fairness, in respect to the applicants, we'll deal with them one at a time with council's indulgence. Item 7.2, development of 2 dwellings at 2 Alexander Drive, Land. There is a recommendation there to refuse this, councillors. Are there any questions in this matter, or are councillor prepared to move the recommendation that's listed on page 20, please? Do you move your hand there, Councillor Edwards, or not?
Yes, so moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder for that, please? Councillor Berry. Is there any dissent? I'll put that. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you.
Bless you.
Thanks.
Thank you. As noted, 7.3 is a similar application at 16 Alexander Drive, but as noted, I think to give the applicants respect, we need to deal with them one at a time. So is there any questions, or is somebody prepared to move the recommendation as noted on page 33? Councillor Dudzik, you move in the motion, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Is there a second? Oh, Councillor Ward. I'll put that in. Is there any opposition? I'll put that. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Um, 7.4, development of 2 dwellings at 1 Alexander Drive for land. Again, the recommendation is similar to the last 2. So
I move, Mr. Mayor.
Move Councillor Edwards. Seconder, please. Councillor Minari. Any opposition? I'll put that. All those in favour? All those in favour? I think Mr. Oh, thank you. Carried. Thank you, Councillor. Next item is item 7.5, and we do have a speaker to this, councillor. So, Mr. Glenn Viala. Mr. Viala, are you online there, able to, for your presentation? You represent the applicant in this matter. Is Mr. Viala there, please? Mr. Viala? Can anyone advise whether Mr. Viala is online there, please?
It says he's connecting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Didn't sort of show up on my screen. Thank you. I'll just give it a few minutes
He's got the mute on as well. Oh no, that's not Mr. Viala. There's Mason.
Beg your pardon?
It's got Mason written on it.
Well, on my list, is Mr. Glenn Viala is the applicant, so
You need
I'm
to
not
unmute.
sure. So
Unmute. There we go.
There we go.
Apologies for that. Looks like my son's been playing with my computer. Yeah, it's Glenn
Okay.
Villella here speaking.
thank you, Mr. Viala. I can hear you. So if you wish to give your presentation with respect to this
Okay.
this item, please.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much to the Mayor and Development Assessment Committee. Thank you for allowing me to present this evening. Thanks also to Jyoti McCann and Henry Bezenhout for their assessment and time with this application. Look, we possibly believe the initial subdivision boundary between lots 12 and 23 may have been created in error due to the inaccessible 20 to 40 metre wide strip along this boundary. Inaccessibility to this land has led to our boundary realignment application. Look, notwithstanding this, however, we acknowledge Council's stance relating to the boundary realignment and the implications for the proposed PSP boundary and possible split zoning. Council's discussion in the agenda, particularly relating to lot 23, states that on page 69, removing the majority of the flatter land on this parcel compromises its future viability. We understand this stance and agree that the flatter areas on this lot are at a premium. With the approval of a carriageway easement, access to approximately 1.6 hectares abutting lots 12 and 13 is guaranteed, thus preserving the land's future viability. We therefore request that should the DAC not support the boundary realignment between lots 12 and 23, we strongly urge approval of the carriageway easement application so this land can be accessed now and in the future, whether for agricultural purposes or general maintenance. We would like to work with Council in any way possible in order to achieve this. Thanks for your time and for your further consideration on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Viala. Council, is there any questions of Mr. Viala on this matter, please? Councillor Ward, you have your hand up there, please.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I noticed on page 69, it did state that the applicant was requested to discuss the boundary realignment with the VPA and then revisit the realignment of boundaries. However, the applicant decided to continue with the realignment of boundaries with council. Can I ask why that advice was not taken? Because that seems to me to be sensible advice.
Mr. Viala, you wish to respond to that, please?
Yeah, at that stage, our client had already had discussions with the VPA. The VPA had mentioned earlier on in the piece, before the application, they wanted our client to proceed with the council application.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Viala.
They'd already spoken to them.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any other questions, councillors? If there's any,
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Ward, another question, please.
Yep. Thank you. I suppose this is more of a question for Henry. If we're not going to consider the planning application as submitted, how can we consider an application to approve a carriageway easement adjustment?
Mr. Bezuidenhout, do you wish to respond to that, please?
Mr. Mayor, to consider that, we will have to amend the application and do a reassessment, because obviously it's new information that's been provided tonight. So preference is that I don't need to submit a new application. But I'll have to get advice if they can still amend it at this late stage in the process. It's already at decision stage.
Thank you.
We can need to amend it. Council can't, we can't amend. We're not legally allowed to amend an application on behalf of an applicant.
That's what I thought. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Mr. I think for what it's worth, councillors, plan and creation of easement doesn't need a planning permit.
Yep.
Okay, so any other questions of Mr. Fiala, please? I can't see everyone on the screen, so if there is somebody who does have a question, please just say your name and that. I just can't see everyone on the screen. So no further questions of Mr. Fiala. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Fiala. It's much appreciated, and council will now duly will actually deal with this matter. So thank you very much. Councillors, we have this matter before us. There's a recommendation on page 61. So councillors, I'm in your hands, please.
I move to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Is there a seconder for that? Is there a seconder? Councillor Berry. Is there any opposition? Councillor Tatchell, do you have your hand there, please? You're on mute at the moment, Councillor Tatchell. You're on mute, Councillor Tatchell. Councillor Tatchell obviously having problems with IT there. Councillor Tatchell, you're on mute at the moment if you're wishing to respond, please. Okay. Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. Is there any dissent? Okay, I'll put that, council. All those in favour? It's carried, thank you. The next item of business, councillors, is item 7.6. Which relates to the buildings and works associated with the existing industrial premises, abattoir at 6 Bullpack Road, Bacchus Marsh. We have 3 speakers to this item. Mr. Glenn Jacobson, representing the applicant. Is Mr. Jacobson online, please, or available? Mr. Jacobson? Is Mr. Jacobson available? Mr. Jacobson?
Yep. Hello, just joining now.
Yes, thank you. Welcome, and
welcome. Thank you.
Your opportunity to present to council on this matter. So over to you.
So sorry, there seems to be a little bit of a lag. So obviously my name is Glenn Jacobson. We're working on behalf of the applicant, which is I'm just getting some reverberation. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can. If you could please
sorry,
continue.
Just seems to be a bit of a lag coming through. So obviously we're working on behalf of the client, L&G Meats.
If you just continue, we just know there might be a lag. If you could just continue presenting, please, and we'll just work our way through it.
So we're reading through the conditions that have been presented by council around the recommendations, and we're obviously concerned about condition 4 within the proposed planning application, which has been recommended for approval. But condition 4 actually puts a restriction on for limiting the life of the building for 5 years, which we would actually like removed or amended to be in I guess, consideration with the client, because obviously they're not looking to build a constructible building to operate and assist with the operation of the existing business and then having to decommission and remove it in 5 years. So we're wanting to get the condition 4 removed as far as the timeline around 5 years for removal of the building once completion of the permit is given.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. Council, is there any question of Mr. Jacobson, please? Okay, thank you, Mr. Jacobson. Thank you very much for your presentation, and your concerns are duly noted.
Thank you.
The next speaker,
Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Ward. Sorry, I missed you.
Yeah, sorry, I was a bit slow putting the hand up. Look, I spoke to Joe, Mr. Jacobson, and I had a lengthy discussion, as I think most councillors have. Can I just ask? I suppose council's concern, to be quite honest, is
well, is this, sorry, Councillor Ward, is this a question to Mr. Jacobson or a question to officers?
No, it's a question to Mr. Jacobson. Is council's concern? Council's concern is obviously is the long-term move out to Parwin. So, is the concern about the clause or the timeframe proposed by the clause?
It actually, Yeah, so it's actually around the timeline, and the fact the clause is very specific about 5 years for the removal of the building. Obviously, the commitment from Fiales is still to move to Parwin, but there are a number of reasons around services and other things. So the concern, and you would have spoken to Joe about that, is the specific time around it and what appears in the clause, no negotiation or reconsideration around timelines. So, yep.
Sorry, yeah, Councillor Ward, a follow-up question, please.
Yeah, well, it doesn't say no negotiation. There's within 5 years unless otherwise agreed by council. So I think council's left itself open to negotiation. So I'm sure if I can use the term, Joe came back to council and said, look, can we amend it because of A, B, C? Can we make it 6 years? I can't speak on behalf of future councils, but I'm sure council's committed to supporting a business that employs 95 or more employees. So is it more about the clause itself or the timeframe? So let's go back to that.
Look, definitely the restrictive timeline, and I guess the wording around it being agreed by council without not agreement between West Side or Fiales and council. So if you read through the clause, and I don't know how enforceable it is, but it actually says removed from site within 5 years of completion of the development, unless otherwise agrees by the council, which actually doesn't give Westside or Fiales any recourse or in terms of negotiation or reconsideration around time. So while it actually only stipulates agreement by council, I guess they feel that then on their behalf they don't have any way of rebutting it or agreeing to extend that timeline. Because based on, at the moment, as you know, COVID and a whole range of things that happen within the meat industry within Australia, to actually give a firm timeline about moving in 5 years is impossible for a business of that size. We've recently done some study works for MLA, which is a Meat and Livestock Association, and under the current arrangement that they work with the restricted workspace and the segregation, they're currently operating in the low 10% of industry as far as operational efficiencies and costs. So they're very inefficient based on reduction. So for them to actually then give a guaranteed timeline of saying we are going to move in 5 years, and in reality it's probably from when permit is granted now saying it's 12 months to build, the timeline is just restricted.
Yeah.
Councillor Ward, a follow-up question there for you, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I completely understand that, and that's why I was trying to drill down into it, because I understand, and if you look around the state, the amount of the impact on the meatworks right across the state, let's call them meatworks, abattoirs, from COVID has been significant. And I understand why they really want to segregate the business to ensure business continuity. So I was really I just wanted to understand the concerns there, because the investment they're making to ensure that they can continue to employ 95 employees is I think is commendable. But also, we need to protect the long-term interests of council and support the Parwin industrial precinct. So, it's trying to balance both those interests.
Yeah, and look, obviously, Joe is one of the people who will speak after us, so you can talk to him about that. He's registered to speak, but definitely the 5-year restrictive window is we see as prohibitive to allow that investment to go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. Councillor Berry.
Yeah.
Councillor Berry, if you have a question or query there, please, of Mr. Jacobson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Berry here, Glenn.
Hello.
So what would you consider to be a fair timeline?
And look, Joe is probably better to answer that, but I think if it was 5 years and then after that negotiable on timeline, because in 5 years they would be in a better position to obviously give you that, but Joe would be better from a business perspective to talk to that when he has timeline. But I would envisage that 5 to 10 years is something where as a timeline which is more acceptable for the business. So, but I think Joe should speak to that when he has his time after us.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. Any more further questions of Mr. Jacobson, councillors? Okay, thank you, Mr. Jacobson. Thanks for your presentation. As I said before, though, your comments will be in presentation, be duly noted. The next speaker is Mr. Edward Lynch. Mr. Lynch, you're also representing the applicant in this matter. Is Mr. Lynch available, please? Mr. Lynch?
He's just connecting, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, I see that. Yes, thank you. You're on mute at the moment, Mr. Lynch, please, if you could unmute and yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the Chair, Mayor and the committee. So yes, I also
Sort of breaking up there at the moment. Mr. Lynch, if you could please continue if you're able to, please.
I also represent the applicant in this matter and work for Nearest Australia as a consultant. I'll continue. There's bad feedback. I trust you can hear me.
Yes.
Bad time lag. Thank you. I think many of the key issues have been addressed in the initial speech by Glenn. I think it's important though, and I wanted to just reiterate that this dip proposed to the Westside Meets is very much an augmentation of the existing practices on the site, and I think we all understand, particularly through communication more directly, this relates to the ability of the business to continue to operate effectively and robustly on the existing site, given the current impost that Corona has created. The key issue here, of course, appears to be this commitment, and I won't speak directly to that issue. I'll leave that for Joe to talk. But from my perspective, working with Westside Meets, commitment remains to move to Parwin, but the challenges about putting a finite timeframe around that are obviously significant. So I think I'll leave that issue for Joe to address. Happy to answer any questions, but I think it's notable and should be remembered that this application is recommended approval. There were no objections to this. It has been referred on traffic, has been referred on water. It is a complying application. The issue, of course, for us is that condition 4, more importantly for Westside Meets. So I don't take questions, but I think the discussion that needs to happen now is probably with Westside Meets and Joe himself.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Councillor, is there any question of Mr. Lynch? I think it's sort of a continuation of the presentation presented by Mr. Jacobson. Are there any questions, please?
I have a question of officers, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Tatchell, please.
I just want to clarify the 5-year time frame is after construction, not during, isn't that correct?
Mr. Bazudin, how are you able to respond to Councillor Tatchell's question there, please, about when the clock starts on that 5 years?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. The conditions are worded, the 5 years commences only after construction is completed. So they can complete the new development, the new building, and then the 5-year commences.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bazudin. Does that answer your question, Councillor Tatchell, please?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any further questions of Mr. Lynch in this matter, councillors? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Thank you for your presentation. And as I said, council will duly take that into consideration when determining this matter. So thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Joe Fiali. Is Mr. Fiali on the line there, please? Mr. Fiali, welcome. You're just connecting, I see. You're on mute at the moment, Mr. Fiali.
Hello.
Yes, thank you. If you could sort of...
Good evening, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Fiali. Please continue.
I just want to make a couple of points towards the time frame in regards to the 5 years and also the conditions of removing the building. As we know, we've been trying to, and I've spoken to a few councillors in the last few days, we've been trying to get up at Parwin for the last 16 years. So we've had a long drawn out period trying to get up there. So if you told me 16 years ago that we'd be taking 16 years, I would have said you got rocks in your head. But 5-year time frame on trying to run a business, keep people employed, and then also move an operation up there that would cost up to $90 million is a bit hard to take in regards to a time frame. We're definitely going up there, but on the proviso, we get our first stage of the protein plant in the industrial park operating. and also start filling it up. We're investing $60 million in that project up to date. So it's all about timeframes and budgets. 3 years ago, if you said to me, we be trying to build this distribution centre on our site, I would say we had rocks in our heads. But COVID come along, it's changed the environment. So all I'm asking is I need more time frame. And when it comes down to removing the building, I don't understand the idea of building a $6 million building and then I've got to remove it. I'm not getting that from council. Why do I have to remove a structure when it's agriculture? And if I want to use it as agriculture, as farming, fruit stalls, cool room for market gardens, I can undo that later. But if I have to remove an actual building, I don't understand what the point of that is.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fiali. Councillor Ward has his hand up there. Councillor Ward, you have a question for Mr. Fiali, please.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Joe, thanks for the time on the phone today.
No worries.
So, Joe, I just want to understand your objection to clause 4. Is it about the building being removed and located, or is it about the 5-year time frame? And if it's about the time frame, what do you think would be reasonable?
Mr. Fiali, please.
I've always said 5 to 10 years when we start building up there, but I'm saying 5 to 10 years. So you give me 5 years and something goes wrong, what do I do? Do I still pull the building down and the business down, or do I have a fight with council in 5 years' time?
Thank you, Mr. Fiali. Are there any further questions, or Councillor, would you have a supplementary question? Yes, please.
Yeah, and your concerns about removing the building, obviously, I thought that applied to the new portable building. So can I seek clarification? I suppose it's the question from Henry.
No, it is a portable building, but I still believe that if the building has to be removed, it is a still structure on a concrete plinth. So you still need, you can remove the building. But what my point is here, if I have to remove that whole building, I can remove all the machinery and the robotic stuff in the building, but I'm talking about leaving the structure there in regards to if later on when we move out of there, what do we do with the site? Is council going to buy the site? Are we going to use it as a store, as a market, fruit stalls, refrigeration? Who knows? A motel. We could do a lot of things.
Yeah, but Joe,
thank you, Mr. Councillor Ward, please. Yes,
yeah.
please.
Sorry,
yeah,
guys.
Joe, I understood the clause related to only to the demountable building, so it didn't relate to the site or the original building.
Okay.
Is that correct, Henry?
Mr. Bezuidenhout.
That's correct. It relates to the new building.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Are there any further questions of Mr. Fiali, please? Thank you very much, Mr. Fiali, for your presentation, and those points that you raised will now be duly noted, and council will then now make a decision on this particular item. So thank you very much for giving your presentation and also advising councillors of your position in this matter.
Appreciate it.
Councillors, we have a recommendation there before us. Are there any questions councillors may wish to raise with officers in this matter before we go further? Okay, councillors, I'm in your hands. We have a recommendation starting on page 71 and continuing for several pages thereafter. So, Councillor Ward, please. You moving the motion?
No, I actually want to discuss, and I don't know protocol here, Mr. Mayor, so I'm at your guidance.
Well, I think, sorry, Councillor, if I may, if we're going to have a discussion, we need to suspend standing orders because we have had this, we moved to this point. So if you want to suspend standing orders and we get a second, we'll suspend standing orders and have a conversation, and then we'll resume standing orders to deal with the matter. So that would be the way to proceed. So you're moving to suspend standing orders?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder for that, please? Councillor Minari. I'll put that. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Now, Councillor Ward, now to sort of have a bit of a conversation about this while we're not in formal council meeting.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, in speaking to Joe and listening to the applicants tonight, I'm comfortable that they're committed to moving to Parwin. I suppose they're a little bit concerned about the unless otherwise agreed to by council clause. Council, I think, has indicated in that clause they're open to flexibility, which I think is as we should be. But I think what they're saying is that they're concerned about the 5-year clause, because what they're trying to do, as I understand it, is meatworks and abattoirs have been really impacted by COVID. So they're trying to ensure business continuity by putting in this new demountable building. So if one part of their building gets shut down, the other parts of the building don't get shut down. So I would suggest that we show some flexibility or lenience on the 5 years. I've got no doubt they're committed to the Parwin Industrial Precinct, but I think the 5-year clause has spooked them a little bit. I'm comfortable with it unless otherwise agreed to by council, but I think they're a little bit concerned by that. So I'm just throwing it open for discussion, and I'm happy to discuss with Henry, Derek, and other councillors to get your views on that.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Berry, you have a comment or question there, please?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. When you actually do read that clause 4, it does say unless otherwise agreed. So I think from unusual circumstances, there may be extensions available to them down the track. My only concern, and I have spoken to Joe, and he was very adamant that 5 years is not a long time, and I was very thinking the thought of when you're building a building, when you're running such a large business, 5 years isn't a long time. However, I was a bit concerned just in his conversation then when he was talking.
Could we actually just, sorry, Councillor, could we just sort of this is an application and perhaps not use names of Mr. Just sort of the application itself, if you wouldn't mind, please.
So I was concerned in some of the conversations around I was getting an inkling maybe that the building might get tried to stay there. So in the future. So yeah, I'm happy with what's in clause 4 at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Councillor Dudzik, you have your hand up there, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's my understanding that if the applicant didn't think he could meet the 5 years, that at 4 years he could probably put in an application to council to try and extend it. Wouldn't that be true? Surely he should aim for 5 years to start, and if he can't meet it, then it should come back to the council at the day to make a decision.
Probably that's a question to Mr. Bezuidenhout, Councillor, so I'll direct that question to Mr. Bezuidenhout to respond. Mr. Bezuidenhout, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's a correct interpretation. That's 100% correct, and he needn't wait until the end of the 5-year period. He can approach council beforehand. Okay,
thank you, Mr. Bezuidenhout. Councillor Dudzik, another question there, please.
No, I'm just trying to put my hand down.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions, councillors? Any other comments on that before we resume standing orders?
Yeah, I'd probably make one, Mr.
Councillor
Mayor,
Edwards,
in relation to the point of the planning application is whether it's a permissible use or appropriate use. Whilst I understand that timeframes might be there for good reasons in council strategic planning, I'm not sure they're necessarily supported by the Planning Act in relation to trying to move someone to a different location if we've already deemed that a suitable location for those activities. And in fact, from what I see, this is to improve those activities, particularly as a result of the pandemic, enables separation. So I'm not sure we're arguing over the right thing over the time frame, or whether we should be arguing whether it's permissible use or not.
Thank you, Councillor. Perhaps as a question I'll direct to Mr. Bezuidenhout. Mr. Bezuidenhout, hopefully you're able to hear the question from Councillor Edwards regarding about whether it's the use of the site itself, but over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With your permission, I would like to pass on to Mr. Rob Phillish, and then I'll just add, if that's possible.
Okay. Mr. Phillish, you available there, please? Mr. Phillish? So, Rob, I think you're on mute. Mr. Phillish, are you there?
I believe his headset is not working. I think, Henry, you might need to just take this question.
Thank you.
So I can respond to the question, Mr. Mayor, and then see if Mr. Lavelle wants to add. The permit application in front of us is for development. So they haven't asked for intensification of the use. They've asked to extend the development, and that's what we've assessed. We're also mindful that the land has been rezoned. There is intent to relocate to Parwin. So we're mindful when we did the assessment that that is an objective that we still keep in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Bazurdenhet. Councillor Manara, you have your hand up there, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just another question on number 4 in regards to removal of the site within 5 years. So would that be the entire building finished and removed by 5 years, or would planning be satisfied with it at least started?
Mr. Bazurdenhet, do you wish to respond to that, please?
The way the conditions are now worded is that that needs to be removed in 5 years' time, unless as otherwise agreed by council, if circumstances changes.
Thank you, Mr. And picking up on Councillor Tatchell's earlier question, that would be 5 years from the date of completion of the building. That's when the clock would start. That'd be correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, any further questions whilst we're still in standing orders have been suspended? Oh, Mr. Phillips is back online. Mr. Phillips, do you wish, hopefully, you wish to respond to that question that Mr. Bazurdenhout was dealing with? Anything more to add, please?
Not sure you can hear me.
Yes, we can. I can anyway.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Bazurdenhout answered the question. The use is already established.
Okay, so this is the development, not a use question. Okay,
correct.
Thank you. Any other comments and questions that's based, councillors? Okay, somebody moves that we resume standing orders, please. Councillor Edwards, Councillor Manari, I'll put that all those in favour. It's carried, thank you. Councillors, now we move back into the meeting, and the matter of 7.6 is there. There is a recommendation. So I'm in your hands, councillors.
So I'd like to move it, Mr. Mayor, with an amendment to remove condition number 4, which is the proposed building must be removed from the site within 5 years of completion of development, unless otherwise agreed by council.
So Councillor Edwards has moved that condition 4 be deleted, and I think then there'd be a subsequent change in all the numbers, but that'd be something that would work its way through. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Ward. Is there any opposition? Councillor Dudzik. Councillor Edwards, do you wish to speak to your alternate recommendation?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Mayor. So from my perspective, we're allowing this building to be built. We see that the usage is in line with what's currently being used on site and will help the business improve. I think if it helps create jobs or maintain jobs within our shire, I think that's a good thing. I think we shouldn't confuse the issue of this site being used versus us having a desire to grow the Parwin precinct. Whilst I fully support the Parwin precinct, and I love the Fialis and the Meatworks to move up there in the next 12 months, that's a business decision. I don't think it's a planning decision. So therefore, I suggest that this, whilst we are trying to encourage them to move, I don't think we could be supported in VCAT if they were to challenge that condition.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Ward, do you wish to, as a seconder of that, do you wish to pass comment on that matter, please?
Look, I'm convinced of their commitment to move to Parwin, which is comforting, but I just think the 5-year time frame did spook them. So having spoken to them today, I'm confident they're committed to moving to Parwin, but also I don't support the 5-year time frame, so I'm therefore happy to second the revised motion put up by Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Dudzik, you had your hand up in opposition, please.
Yes, the applicant has time to actually construct the building. The 5 years doesn't start till after it is constructed. If he doesn't believe that he can move to Parwin within the 5-year period, he has the option of putting in a further application to council for an extension of time on that. And I think that's the process that should be followed.
Thank you, Councillor Dudley. Are there any other speakers for or against this item? Councillor Tatchell, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'd just like to include the ratepayers do have an investment in this, and we have invested heavily in this arrangement to move the abattoirs out to Parliament. So it's a little bit more complex than a business decision. I think the fact that if we were to have no time frame on it, I think that creates a problem for future councils. I note that Mr. Pioli does have the capacity to negotiate if there's an issue or if things change, as they do. I just think we need to be really careful that we just don't have an open-ended arrangement that then we can't control. I probably disagree that VCAP would be against this. I tend to think that whilst I know that Mr. Pioli has good intentions for Parliament, I understand all that, and I do understand that Mr. Pioli wants to move from the avenue. I think in the discussion that was had during the presentation, it would suggest that there's a lot of if in there as well. So I would just like to, if we want to extend the time frame, that's fine. But I think to remove it totally, I think would create a problem for future councils. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Councillor Berry, you wish to speak for or against the motion put up by Councillor Edwards?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a little bit the same as Councillor Tatchell and would probably more consider a reduced time from 5 to 10 years to say 5 to 7 or leave it at 7. I don't think, given all the situations with residents around the area, I think the 7-year would be a better consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Are there any other speakers for or against? Councillor Dudley, you've already had you've spoken to it, so I have to protocol, unless it's a question.
I just wanted to say, if this fails, I flagged that there could be an alternate motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers for or against this? I'll return to Councillor Edwards as mover of that motion. Councillor Minari, you had sorry, I beg your pardon. Councillor Minari.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also agree with Councillor Tatchell and Councillor Berry. Sort of in between. I'm quite comfortable with the wording 5 to 10 years. I think we need to have some sort of limit mentioned in the paperwork.
I think what's before us now was the motion put forward by Councillor Edwards. We're not sort of in a bidding war as to what the number we might land on. So, Councillor Edwards, you wish to close the debate, please?
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Mayor. So, councillors, I'd just like to point to the argument that you apply for a permit to build a shed, you get a permit to build a shed. You apply for a permit to build a cool room, you get a permit to build a cool room. I think that anybody would be super disappointed if you applied for a permit and they said, yeah, you can have your shed on your house for 5 years, but you know what, we don't think it'll be all right in 10, so you're going to have to pull it down in 10 years. We're talking about a significant amount of money investment by an organisation. We're saying that this potentially has future uses. It's an orchard area, it's a cool room. As Mr. Fiali points out, it probably value adds to the site over the longevity. So I think that by building a packing room, it is not inconsistent with the area. There's probably 4 or 5 along the Avenue of Honour at the different orchards, and I think that this is, I think it's a bit ludicrous that we'll actually put a time frame and say, okay, you can have a packing shed, but you've got to take it out in 5 years' time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, that ends the debate. I'll now put the motion put forward by Councillor Edwards, which is basically as on the business paper, with the deletion of condition 4, and that the others will be duly numbered if the motion is successful. So I'll put that. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 8, updating trends and issues and other matters. Mr. Pursuit, are there any matters to bring before council here this evening, please?
So, Mr. Mayor, no further updates.
Okay. Are there any process forward and works programs you wish to comment on, please?
No comment, Mr. Mayor, no updates.
Okay. Any update of VCAT decisions, recent ones to bring to council's attention or to make them aware of?
No recent decisions, but I can hand over to Mr. Lavelle just to inform council of the upcoming hearing next week.
Mr. Lavelle, please.
Okay. Just to explain that Gisborne Road, Merrimere, which is a conditions appeal for a materials recycling operation, that's going to appeal next Monday and Tuesday, and both the applicant and the respondents, who are the respondents are from the Merrimere precinct, they're both being represented by lawyers, and both actually have expert town planning witnesses, and that's scheduled for 2 days. And just another update from the last DAC meeting, the compulsory conference for Green Hills Road in Blackwood, that was unsuccessful mediation, so that's proceeding ahead to a full merits hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell. Any questions of Mr. Lovell on those two matters, councillors? Okay, thank you. Thank you for that update. Other business, any other business, councils or officers that might be required? Okay, thank you. Item 12, date of the next meeting, we're listed for Wednesday, the 16th of March of this year. So that'll be the next DAC meeting. So thank you very much, everybody, for your participation and involvement here today. Thank you for the presenters for presenting and informing council of the matters on the business paper. So at this point in time, I'll bid you all au revoir, and we'll resume